Welcome to our deep dive into Aaron Nimzowicz's My System.
My System.
You've handed us the 2007 Quality Chess Edition.
Oh, wow.
New translation and all, though.
Yeah.
So we know you're serious about getting to the heart of this chess masterpiece.
Absolutely.
It's a big one.
It is. And you've come to the right place. Nimzowitsch wasn't just explaining moves.
Yeah.
He was revealing a whole new way of thinking about chess.
Okay.
About control, space, and the subtle power dynamics on the board.
Let's set the stage first.
Okay.
Who was Nimzowitsch, and why should his ideas matter to us nearly a century later?
Well, picture the chess world in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
You've got these towering figures, Steinitz, Lasker, Tarrasch,
Right.
representing the classical school of thought.
The old guard.
They were all about rapid development, controlling the center with pawns, launching direct attacks.
Got it.
Then comes Nimzowitsch,
Come.
this Latvian player and writer who starts challenging these established norms.
So he was kind of like the chess world's disruptive innovator.
Exactly. And My System, originally published in 1925,
Okay.
became his manifesto.
Right.
It wasn't just a set of openings or tactical tricks.
Yeah.
It was a philosophy, a framework for understanding the strategic principles behind the game.
Okay, I'm ready to have my assumptions challenged.
Okay.
Let's dive into some of these core concepts.
Okay.
Starting with that intriguing image on the book cover you provided.
Right.
It's just a pawn.
Right.
What's the story there?
That's a visual representation of one of Nimzowicz's most powerful ideas. The blockade.
Okay.
You see a white pawn blocking the advance of a black pawn.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple,
Yeah.
but it illustrates this profound point about positional play.
Okay.
Sometimes strength lies not in brute force,
Right.
but in restraint,
Okay.
in patiently controlling key squares
Wow.
and preventing your opponent's progress.
That's about strategically limiting your opponent's options rather than just going for the immediate attack.
Precisely. Think of it like this. You're not just playing against the pieces on the board.
Right.
You're playing against your opponent's mind.
Okay.
A well-executed blockade can be incredibly frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
It disrupts their plans,
I can imagine.
forces them to make concessions, and can even lead to psychological advantages.
That's fascinating. This is making me rethink my entire approach to the game.
I love to hear that.
It's not just about what moves you make. It's about the impact those moves have on your opponent,
Absolutely.
both positionally and mentally.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that brings us to another key concept from My System,
Okay.
prophylaxis.
Prophylaxis. Sounds a bit medical.
It does.
Are we talking about keeping our chess pieces healthy?
In a way, yes. Prophylaxis in chess is about preventing your opponent's plans before they even fully materialize.
Gotcha.
It's like anticipating their ideas
That-
and taking steps to neutralize them before they become serious threats.
So it's not just reacting to what your opponent does.
No.
It's being proactive and thinking ahead.
Exactly.
Like a chess grandmaster version of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. And this concept can be applied far beyond the chessboard, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Thinking about potential problems in advance.
Right.
Whether in business, relationships, or even just planning a trip.
Yeah.
Can save you a lot of trouble down the line.
A lot of trouble.
Yeah.
It's about strategic thinking,
Right.
not just tactical reaction.
I like it.
And that leads us to another fascinating and often misunderstood concept from My System.
Okay.
Overprotection.
Overprotection. Now that sounds a bit excessive, doesn't it? Isn't that a waste of resources?
That's what's so brilliant about Nimzowitsch.
Okay.
He challenges the traditional view that every piece should have a single, clearly defined role.
Right.
Overprotection, in his view,
Yeah.
is not about being paranoid.
Okay.
It's about making a piece so secure that it becomes a powerful base for further operations.
So instead of just defending a piece,
Yeah.
you're using that defense to build up even more strength.
You got it.
It's almost like building a fortress around your key pieces.
Think of those medieval castles with multiple layers of walls, watchtowers, and moats.
Right.
They were designed not just to withstand attacks, but to project power and control over the surrounding territory.
Okay.
That's what Nimzowitsch is doing with overprotection in chess.
That's a fantastic analogy. You're making me see chess in a whole new light.
Good.
This overprotection idea,
Yeah.
it's counterintuitive.
It is.
But the more you explain it,
Yeah.
the more sense it makes.
And it ties directly into Nimzowicz's approach to the center of the board,
Okay.
which, as you know,
Yeah.
is traditionally considered the most important territory in chess.
Right. Control the center, control the game. Every beginner learns that.
That's the classical thinking, yes.
Yeah.
But Nimzowitsch had a different perspective.
Oh,
He wasn't obsessed with occupying the center with pawns like the classical players.
wait, really? You're telling me I don't have to rush my pawns into the center?
Not necessarily. Nimzowitsch believed in controlling the center from a distance, often with pieces.
Yeah.
He saw the center as a kind of battleground where you exert your influence
Uh-huh.
without necessarily committing all your forces to it.
So a more indirect approach. This is blowing my mind. It's like he's giving me permission to break the rules,
I like that.
to find new and creative ways to achieve my goals.
What's fascinating here is how Nimzowitsch flips the script on conventional wisdom.
Okay.
He forces us to reconsider what strength truly means in chess.
Yeah.
Is it about brute force occupation?
Right.
Or is it about subtle, patient control? That's the question he wants us to ask.
Okay, I'm starting to see why my system is still studied and debated nearly a century after it was written.
It's timeless.
It's not just about specific moves, it's about challenging assumptions
Yes.
and finding new ways to think about strategy.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so relevant even if you're not a chess master.
Yeah.
These concepts, prophylaxis, overprotection, indirect control, are all about long-term thinking,
Okay.
planning,
Yeah.
and understanding your opponent.
Gotcha.
These are valuable skills in any competitive situation,
Right.
whether it's a business negotiation, an online debate, or even just trying to win that family game night.
You're absolutely right. I'm already starting to see how I can apply these ideas to my own life,
Good.
both on and off the chessboard.
I like it.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far,
It has.
and I'm eager to learn more.
Me too.
Let's continue exploring the fascinating world of Aaron Nimzowitsch and my system.
Yeah.
We'll be back after a short.
Actually, there's no need to break.
Oh, yeah?
We've got more fascinating ground to cover right now. You mentioned Nimzowitsch being a chess rebel.
Yeah.
But his ideas about pawn structures and piece activity were truly revolutionary.
Now that you mention it, while reading my system, I came across this idea of good and bad bishops
Yes.
and how pawn chains can influence piece mobility.
Absolutely.
Can we unpack that a bit? It seems to connect with what we were just discussing about controlling the center.
Absolutely. Nimzowitsch dedicated a whole section of my system to the concept of pawn chains
Okay.
and how they impact piece activity.
Gotcha.
He recognized that pawn structures create imbalances on the board,
Yeah.
influencing which pieces are more powerful than others.
So for those of us who haven't quite reached grandmaster level yet,
Sure.
can you break down this good bishop, bad bishop thing?
Of course.
It sounds almost judgmental.
Not to worry. It's all about how freely your pieces can move.
Okay.
A good bishop has open diagonals, allowing it to zip across the board,
Okay.
exerting influence from afar.
So it can kind of control more of the board.
Exactly.
Okay.
Conversely, a bad bishop is one that's hemmed in by its own pawn structure.
Okay.
It's movement restricted.
So if your pawns are all bunched up, your bishop can get stuck behind them, like it's trapped in a maze.
Exactly. And this is where Nimzowicz's understanding of pawn chains comes in.
Okay.
He realized that by carefully constructing and manipulating these chains,
Mm-hmm.
you could control which bishops were good and which were bad, both for yourself and your opponent.
That's incredible. So it's not just about the pieces themselves.
No.
It's about how your pawns create an environment where certain pieces can thrive.
Yes.
It's like you're the architect designing the board to your advantage.
Precisely. And that's what makes Nimzowicz's work so groundbreaking.
Okay.
He was one of the first chess thinkers to truly delve into the nuances of positional play.
Yeah.
He understood that chess is not just about moving pieces around.
Right.
It's about creating a dynamic interplay of forces
Right.
where even seemingly insignificant elements like pawn structure can have a profound impact on the outcome of the game.
This is all starting to feel like a masterclass in positional chess. I'm learning so much about the subtle power dynamics at play. Now, we've talked about prophylaxis,
Yes.
overprotection, controlling the center,
Yeah.
and even good and bad bishops.
Right.
But I want to circle back to that concept of the blockade.
Okay.
We saw the lone pawn on the book cover.
Yeah.
But can you give us a real-world example of how this plays out in an actual game? How does a blockade become a weapon?
Of course. Imagine your opponent has this menacing pawn chain advancing towards your king side.
Okay.
They're poised to break through and launch a devastating attack.
Right.
A classic blockade would involve using your pieces to create a defensive wall,
Okay.
preventing those pawns from advancing any further.
Gotcha.
You're effectively shutting down their attack before it even gets started.
So it's like building a no-go zone for your opponent's pawns while making progress.
Exactly. And the beauty of a blockade is that it's not just a passive defensive maneuver.
Right.
It's a dynamic form of control that can slowly squeeze your opponent's position,
Okay.
forcing them to make concessions and eventually leading to their downfall.
So you're kind of joking them out
Yes,
slowly.
it's a slow burn, but it can be incredibly effective.
This is brilliant. I can already see myself using the blockade in my own games.
Good.
It feels like such a powerful yet understated way to control the board.
And it highlights another key theme that runs throughout my system: patience.
Right.
A successful blockade often requires resisting the temptation to launch premature attacks and instead focus on gradually constricting your opponent's options. It's about playing the long game, recognizing that victory comes not always from brute force, but from subtle manipulation and strategic maneuvering.
It's almost like the chess version of the saying, slow and steady wins the race.
I like that.
Which is actually quite a revelation for me because I tend to be more of an impulsive player.
Okay.
Always looking for that quick tactical knockout.
Sure.
But Nimzowitsch is teaching me that sometimes the most effective approach is to be patient, to wait for the right moment to strike.
And that's a valuable lesson that transcends chess.
Yeah.
Whether you're working towards a long-term goal, building a relationship, or even just trying to master a new skill.
Right.
Patience and discipline are essential.
So if we connect this back to my system, it seems like Nimzowitsch wasn't just teaching people how to play chess.
Right.
He was also imparting valuable life lessons about strategy, patience, and self-control.
Absolutely. His book is a testament to the power of strategic thinking and the importance of challenging conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
But we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to explore. For example, Nimzowitsch was one of the first chess writers to truly delve into the psychological element of the game.
Oh, now this sounds really intriguing. Chess mind games? Tell me everything.
Well, buckle up, because Nimzowitsch believed that understanding your opponent's mentality was just as important as understanding their position on the board.
Right.
He talked about things like provocation, intimidation.
Using your moves to create psychological pressure, forcing errors, and exploiting weaknesses in your opponent's thinking.
So it's not just about what moves you make.
No.
It's about how those moves affect your opponent.
Yes.
Mentally and emotionally. This is getting deep. Can you give us a concrete example of what Nimzowitsch meant by provocation in chess?
Absolutely. Imagine you deliberately leave a piece seemingly unprotected, tempting your opponent to capture it. It looks like a blunder, a freebie.
Oh, yeah, I've fallen for that before.
But it's actually a trap. If they take the bait, they walk straight into a devastating counterattack.
It's like dangling a juicy worm in front of a fish, only to yank them out of the water when they bite. You're luring them into a false sense of security, and then bam, you spring your trap.
Exactly. And Nimzowitsch believed this kind of psychological warfare could be just as effective as any tactical combination.
He was a master of using his moves not just to gain material or positional advantages, but to disrupt his opponent's thinking, to sow seeds of doubt, to make them question their own judgment.
This is mind-blowing. So it's not just about calculating variations and memorizing opening lines.
No.
It's about understanding human psychology.
Yes.
About reading your opponent's intentions and exploiting their weaknesses.
You're getting it. Nimzowitsch was a true innovator in chess strategy.
Wow.
He recognized that chess is a game played between two minds.
Right.
And that the psychological battle is just as important as the battle on the board.
This deep dive has been a revelation. I'm starting to see chess in a whole new light.
Great.
Not just as a game of moves, but as a complex interplay of strategy, psychology, and even a bit of philosophy.
That's what makes my system such a timeless classic.
It is.
It's not just a chess manual. It's a guide to strategic thinking that's as relevant today as it was a century ago. And believe me, we've only just begun to explore its depths. There's so much more to discover. You know, one of the most fascinating aspects of Nimzowitsch's work is how he weaves together these seemingly disparate elements. Strategy, psychology, positional play into a unified system.
You're right. It's not just a collection of random ideas. It's a cohesive philosophy. A way of understanding the game at a deeper level.
And that's why it's called my system, right? It's his personal approach to chess, a way of seeing the game that's both insightful and highly individualistic.
Speaking of my system, You mentioned Nimzowitsch was one of the first writers to really delve into the psychological aspects of chess.
Yes.
Can you give us a specific example from the book?
Sure.
Maybe a game where he used this psychological warfare to gain an advantage.
Absolutely. One game that immediately comes to mind is his famous victory against Semish in Copenhagen, 1923.
Okay.
It's a classic example of Nimzowicz's ability to provoke his opponent, to lure him into a trap using subtle psychological cues.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right.
Set the scene for us.
Well, in the early stages of the game,
Okay.
Nimzowitsch makes a series of seemingly passive moves, allowing Semish to build up a strong central pawn presence.
Right.
It looks like Semish is gaining the upper hand, dictating the pace of the game.
So Nimzowitsch is playing possum.
Exactly.
Letting his opponent get a little overconfident.
Exactly. But it's all part of his plan. He's deliberately giving Semish a false sense of security, lulling him into a trap.
Okay, I'm hooked. What happens next?
Well, as Semish pushes forward with his pawns,
Yeah.
Nimzowitsch begins a series of subtle maneuvers.
Okay.
He doesn't launch a direct attack.
Right.
But instead, he starts to create a web of restrictions around Semish's pieces, slowly but surely limiting their mobility.
So he's using those concepts we discussed earlier.
Yes.
The blockade, prophylaxis, maybe even a little overprotection.
Precisely. He's weaving together these different elements of my system to create a position of quiet but undeniable strength.
And how does Samish react to this?
Well, at first, he doesn't seem to notice the danger.
Okay.
He continues to advance his pawns, believing he's still in control.
Right.
But as the game progresses, he starts to realize that his pieces are becoming tangled, their freedom of movement severely restricted.
It's like that boa constrictor slowly squeezing its prey, isn't it?
Yeah.
The pressure is building, the tension is mounting.
And here's where Nimzowicz's psychological genius comes into play.
Yeah.
He senses Samish's growing discomfort, his frustration at being outmaneuvered, and then, at just the right moment, when Samish is most vulnerable, Nimzowitsch strikes.
Give us the blow-by-blow. What's the knockout punch?
It's not a single blow, but a series of precise moves that exploit the weaknesses Nimzowitsch has carefully cultivated.
Right.
He launches a devastating attack on Semish's king,
using his well-positioned pieces to create an unstoppable mating net.
Wow, what a turnaround. It's like Semish walked right into Nimzowicz's trap.
Yes.
Completely oblivious to the danger until it was too late.
And that's the power of Nimzowicz's My System.
Yeah.
It's not just about knowing the moves.
Right.
It's about understanding the psychology of the game. About knowing when to strike and when to wait.
Right.
About using your opponent's strengths against them.
This game is a perfect illustration of how Nimzowicz's ideas translate into concrete results.
Yes.
It's not just theory.
Right.
It's a practical approach to winning chess games.
Exactly. And that's why his work continues to resonate with players of all levels.
Yeah.
It's not just for grandmasters.
Yeah, right.
It's for anyone who wants to improve their strategic thinking and gain a deeper understanding of the game.
You know, it's amazing how these concepts we're discussing go beyond the chessboard.
Absolutely.
This idea of patience.
Yes.
Of resisting the urge for immediate gratification.
Of understanding your opponent's psychology. These are all valuable life lessons that can be applied to any field.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, navigating a complex relationship, or even just trying to learn a new skill,
right.
Nimzowicz's teachings offer valuable insights into the art of strategy and the psychology of competition.
So if we connected this back to My System, it seems like Nimzowitsch wasn't just a chess player.
Right.
He was also a bit of a philosopher.
Yes.
Someone who understood human nature and the dynamics of conflict.
Absolutely. His book is a testament to the power of strategic thinking, not just in chess, but in life itself.
I'm so glad we took this deep dive into My System.
Me too.
It's not just made me a better chess player.
Yeah.
It's given me a whole new perspective on how to approach challenges in all aspects of my life.
That's what we strive for here on the Duck Dive.
I like that.
And speaking of new perspectives, there's one more fascinating aspect of Nimzowicz's work we need to explore. His emphasis on the importance of endgame play.
The endgame. Isn't that the part of the game where most of the pieces are gone and it's all about just shuffling pawns around?
Well, that's a common misconception. Nimzowitsch believed that the endgame was where true mastery was revealed.
Ooh.
He saw it as a stage of the game where subtle positional advantages could be converted into decisive victories.
So it's not just about checking the king.
No.
It's about squeezing your opponent.
Yes.
Exploiting those tiny imbalances to create winning opportunities.
Exactly. Nimzowitsch was a master of understanding the nuances of endgame play.
Okay.
He knew how to activate his king,
Right.
how to create passed pawns, how to use his pieces to restrict his opponent's mobility, and ultimately, how to force checkmate.
This is making me rethink my entire approach to endgames. I always thought they were just about basic technique.
Okay.
But it sounds like there's a whole world of strategic depth to explore.
And that's what makes Nimzowicz's work so exciting. He challenges us to think differently, to see the familiar in a new light, to discover hidden possibilities in even the most seemingly simple positions.
I'm starting to see why my system is considered a classic.
Yes.
It's not just a book about chess.
Right.
It's a book about thinking about strategy, about understanding the dynamics of conflict and competition.
And it's a book that continues to inspire and challenge players of all levels, nearly a century after it's first published.
You know, one thing that's really struck me throughout this deep dive is how much emphasis Nimzowitsch places on the idea of planning.
Yeah.
He's always talking about anticipating your opponent's moves, developing long-term strategies, and creating favorable conditions for your pieces.
That's one of the core tenets of his philosophy.
Okay.
He believed that chess was not a game of chance or improvisation, but a game of careful calculation and strategic execution.
And it makes sense, right? If you're constantly reacting to your opponent's moves, you're always one step behind.
You are.
But if you have a plan, if you're thinking several moves ahead, you can dictate the course of the game and steer it towards a favorable outcome.
And that's where Nimzowicz's concept of prophylaxis comes into play.
Right.
It's not just about preventing threats. It's about creating a plan that anticipates and neutralizes those threats before they even arise.
So it's not just defense, it's proactive planning.
Precisely.
It's like building a fortress, but also having a blueprint for how to use that fortress to launch your own attacks.
Exactly. And that's what sets Nimzowitsch apart from the classical players of his time. They were focused on rapid development and quick attacks, while he was emphasizing long-term planning and positional dominance.
And it seems like his approach has stood the test of time.
It has.
His ideas are still studied and debated by players of all levels.
Yes.
From beginners to grandmasters.
That's a testament to the power of his ideas.
It is.
He truly was a visionary who revolutionized the way people think about chess.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm starting to see the game in a whole new light, thanks to Nimzowicz's insights.
And we're not done yet. There's still so much more to explore in my system.
I'm ready for more. Let's continue our journey into the fascinating world of Aaron Nimzowitsch.
Well, one area we haven't touched on yet is Nimzowicz's concept of the prophylactic knight.
Prophylactic knight, what's that all about?
It's a fascinating idea that showcases Nimzowicz's deep understanding of piece placement and defensive strategy.
Well, you piqued my curiosity. Give us the lowdown.
It's essentially a prophylactic knight is a knight that's positioned not to attack, but to prevent potential threats.
So it's like a defensive shield.
Exactly.
Guarding key squares and preventing your opponent from developing their pieces effectively.
Precisely. Nimzowitsch believed that knights were particularly well suited for this role. Due to their unique movement pattern and their ability to control a large number of squares.
I see. So instead of using your knights to jump into the attack, you're using them to create a defensive perimeter.
Yes.
To shut down your opponent's plans before they even get started.
Exactly. It's another example of Nimzowicz's emphasis on prophylaxis, on anticipating and neutralizing threats before they become dangerous.
This is brilliant. It's making me rethink my entire approach to using knights.
Good.
I've always thought of them as attacking pieces.
Yeah.
But now I see how powerful they can be in a defensive role.
And that's the beauty of my system.
Yeah.
It challenges our assumptions. It makes us see the game in a new light. And it gives us a deeper understanding of the strategic possibilities of each piece.
Now, we've talked a lot about the defensive aspects of Nimzowicz's ideas. But I'm curious to know how his philosophy translates into attacking play.
All right.
Did he have any specific concepts or strategies for launching attacks?
Absolutely. Nimzowitsch wasn't just about defense. He was also a brilliant attacker. But his approach to attack was quite different from the classical players of his time.
So it wasn't about those quick tactical strikes that we often see in classical games.
Exactly. Nimzowitsch believed that attacks should be carefully prepared.
Right.
that they should emerge organically from a position of strength,
Okay.
and that they should be based on sound positional principles.
So it's about building up your forces,
Yes.
creating weaknesses in your opponent's position, and then striking at the right moment when they're most vulnerable.
Precisely. Nimzowitsch called this prophylaxis and attack.
Prophylaxis and attack.
Yeah.
That sounds almost like a contradiction.
It might seem that way at first,
Yeah.
but it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Think about it.
Okay.
If you've taken the time to anticipate and neutralize your opponent's threats,
Right.
you've essentially created a safe space for your own forces to maneuver and attack.
So by preventing your opponent from creating counterplay,
Yeah.
you're freeing up your own pieces to go on the offensive.
Exactly. And this is where those overprotected pieces we talked about earlier come into play.
Right.
They become powerful launching pads for your attacks, firmly anchored and almost impossible to dislodge.
I'm starting to see the interconnectedness of Nimzowicz's ideas.
Good.
It's like a carefully constructed machine.
Yes.
Where every piece and every concept works together to achieve a common goal.
And that goal is ultimately to create a position of such overwhelming superiority that your opponent has no choice but to crumble.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Nimzowitsch was a bit of a chess rebel.
Yes.
How did his ideas challenge the established chess thinking of his time?
Well, back then, the dominant school of chess thought was the classical school, which emphasized things like rapid development, quick attacks, and controlling the center with pawns.
So it's all about bold, decisive action.
Yes.
Kind of like a chess blitzkrieg.
That's a good analogy. But Nimzowitsch saw things differently. He believed that the classical approach was often too rigid and predictable.
Okay.
It lacked the subtlety and flexibility that he believed were essential for true chess mastery.
So he was advocating for a more nuanced strategic approach.
Yes.
One that emphasized patience, planning, and the psychological elements of the game.
Exactly. And this led to some famous disagreements between Nimzowitsch and the leading chess players of his day.
Oh, I bet those chess arguments were legendary.
They were. One of Nimzowicz's biggest rivals was Siegbert Tarrasch, a staunch defender of the classical school.
Right.
Their debates over chess strategy were heated, to say the least.
So it's kind of like the chess equivalent of a clash of the titans.
That's a great way to put it. And in a way, it was Nimzowitsch who ultimately won the argument.
Really? How so?
Well, while Tarrasch's ideas eventually fell out of favor, Nimzowicz's concepts, like prophylaxis and overprotection, became widely accepted and integrated into modern chess thinking.
So he really did revolutionize the game.
Yes.
Changing the way people approach chess strategy forever.
There's no doubt about it. Nimzowicz's My System is one of the most influential chess books ever written.
Right.
And its impact is still felt today.
This has been an amazing deep dive into the world of Aaron Nimzowitsch and My System.
It has been.
We've covered so much ground.
We have.
But I feel like there's still so much more to explore.
That's the beauty of a classic like this.
Yeah.
It's a book that you can revisit again and again, always discovering new insights and nuances.
And we've only touched on a few of the key concepts here.
We have.
My System delves into so many other fascinating ideas.
Absolutely.
Like the seventh rank, the passed pawn, and the blockade of a passed pawn.
Each of these concepts is a world unto itself.
Right.
Full of strategic possibilities and subtle psychological implications.
So for those of you who are intrigued by Nimzowicz's ideas, we encourage you to go out and read the book.
Absolutely.
It's a challenging read.
It is.
But it's one that will reward you with a deeper understanding of chess.
Yes.
And a new perspective on strategy in general.
Couldn't agree more.
We've covered so much ground already.
Yeah.
From prophylaxis and overprotection. To the psychological battles that unfold on the board.
Absolutely.
But there's one aspect of My System I'm particularly curious about.
Okay.
Nimzowicz's view of the endgame.
The endgame. Often seen as a dry, technical phase.
Right.
But Nimzowitsch, he saw it as the culmination of all strategic principles. He believed true mastery was revealed in those final stages.
So it's not just about shuffling pawns around and hoping for a lucky checkmate.
Not at all. Nimzowitsch saw the endgame as an arena where subtle positional advantages could be transformed into decisive victories.
Can you give us an example of how he achieved this?
Sure.
What made his endgame approach so unique?
Well, take his understanding of the king's role.
Okay.
While classical theory often relegated the king to a passive defensive role in the endgame, Nimzowitsch recognized its potential as an active attacker.
So the king isn't just hiding behind pawns.
No.
It's marching forward.
Yes.
Participating in the final assault.
Precisely. Nimzowitsch understood the king's inherent strength in the endgame.
Okay.
Particularly its ability to support passed pawns.
Right.
And restrict the opponent's king.
That's a fascinating shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It's like the king sheds its royal robes and joins the battle as a warrior.
And this active king strategy ties into another key element of Nimzowicz's endgame approach.
Okay.
His mastery of passed pawns.
Right. We talked about pawn structures earlier.
Yeah.
But how do passed pawns become decisive in the endgame?
Well, a passed pawn,
Yeah.
one unimpeded by enemy pawns,
Right.
has the potential to become a queen.
Okay.
In the endgame, with fewer pieces on the board, this potential becomes incredibly dangerous.
So it's not just about material advantage.
No.
It's about creating this unstoppable force that can march down the board and decide the game.
Exactly. And Nimzowitsch was a master of creating and exploiting passed pawns. He knew how to use his pieces to support their advance, to block the opponent's counterplay, and to create distractions that allowed the pawn to slip through.
This is making me realize that endgames are far more dynamic and complex than I initially thought.
They are.
There's so much strategic depth to uncover.
And that's the beauty of my system.
Yeah?
It challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about every aspect of chess.
Right.
Even those seemingly simple endgames.
Looking back on everything we've discussed, from prophylaxis and overprotection to the psychological warfare and the endgame mastery, one thing is clear. Nimzowitsch was a true visionary.
He was.
He wasn't just a chess player.
Right.
He was a revolutionary thinker.
Absolutely.
Who transformed the way we understand the game.
And his legacy continues to inspire and challenge chess players of all levels.
It does.
Nearly a century after my system was first published.
That's the mark of a true classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Its ideas remain relevant and thought-provoking.
They do.
Sparking debate and shaping the evolution of the game.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise and insights.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's been an incredible journey into the mind of Aaron Nimzowitsch.
To our listener, if you're looking to enhance your chess understanding and strategic thinking, my system is an essential read.
Absolutely.
It's a challenging but rewarding journey.
It is.
That will change the way you approach the game.
Yes.
And perhaps even life itself.
Remember, chess is more than just moving pieces.
Right.
It's a battle of minds.
Yeah.
A test of strategic skill.
Absolutely.
And an endless source of intellectual fascination.
So embrace the challenge.
Yes.
Explore the depths of my system.
Absolutely.
And unlock the potential of Nimzowicz's revolutionary ideas.
Until next time, keep your minds sharp.
Keep them sharp.
And your strategies even sharper.